To Kill a Mockingbird Project by
Kaylee,
Brian,
Whitney,
Sadie, and Gabby.
August 20th, 2009.
author research and social issues. What was Harper Lee's influences? Recurrent themes. How is Scout similar to Harper Lee? What is poverty? Influences. Harper Lee got her influences from life experiences and childhood friends. The setting and several of the characters are drawn from life. Recurrent themes. Some themes that are recurrent in Lee's literature are poverty, social classes, honesty, and racism. How Scout paralleled Harper Lee. Harper Lee and Scout Finch are similar because they both grew up in a small town in Alabama and were both not so girly. Nell Harper Lee was born on April 28, 1926 in Monroeville, Alabama, a city of about 7,000 people in Monroe County. Poverty is hunger, lack of shelter, being sick, and not being able to get a doctor. Poverty is just not having the right necessities to live and get an education. The problem is that hungry people are trapped in severe poverty. They lack the money to buy enough food to nourish themselves. Being constantly malnourished, they become weaker and often sick.
Setting of the novel. The setting of the novel takes place in a sleepy southern town called Macomb, Alabama. The year is 1935, during the Great Depression, which took a major role in the events that took place in the book. Most of the story takes place in the main character's neighborhood where the Finch's home is located. Politics of 1930s. During 1935, Franklin D. Roosevelt was the president. He was elected because people thought that he would handle the Depression very well. The mayor of Alabama was Benjamin Meek Miller. He served from 1931 to 1935. The Depression was a big part of the news. The Great Depression was a period in U.S. history when business was poor and many people were out of work. Race was a prominent issue in the news, and almost everyone was affected by it as well. In the 1930s, people didn't have lots of money because of the Depression. Movies, parlor games, and board games were very popular during the time. Listening to the radio was another popular thing, because people liked to listen to baseball games and big band music. Inspiration for Jim's character. The likely inspiration for Jim Finch's character was Jennings Carter. He was the cousin of Truman Capote, one of Lee's friends since childhood. The curator at the Monroe County Heritage Museum stated, his arm was broken in the same place that Jim's was.
A Man vs. Society conflict is Arthur Riley, or Boo, versus the town people. Boo stays inside his dark house all day. He never goes outside and rarely talks to anyone. Rumors then spread about town about him being a freak. Parents warned their children of the Riley house, but Atticus rarely talked about him. Boo dominated the imagination of Scout, Jim, and Dill. It resolved when Scout saw Boo from his perspective. Boo helped Scout and Jim when Bob Ewell was trying to kill them. When Jim broke his arm, Boo was there to support him. The Great Depression in the U.S. was the worst and longest economic collapse in the history of the modern industrial world. It started in the U.S. but spread to most of the world's industrial countries. The Great Depression saw rapid declines in the production and sale of goods and a sudden severe rise in unemployment. In 1933, the worst point of the Depression, more than 15 million Americans were unemployed. Businesses and banks closed and many people lost their jobs. Americans spent more money than they earned. It ruined thousands of investors and destroyed the economy. Still, throughout the 1930s, the Depression ended in the United States because of the great spending for World War II. Small towns didn't have a lot of agriculture to ship. Also, they didn't have a lot of money. The Great Depression in relation to Kill a Mockingbird. Great Depression takes place during the time of the novel. Atticus quit the farm because farmers were hit the hardest. He went back to school as a lawyer. It took place in the small town of Macomb, Alabama during the climax of the Great Depression. Franklin Roosevelt was also president.
Caroline Boone?
Caroline Boone, that's
Yeah. Alright, toodaloos.
The historical person is Harriet Tubman. She was born in 1920 in Dorchester County, Maryland. She died March 10, 1913 in Auburn, New York. She was a famous abolitionist, a Civil War spy for South Carolina, a nurse, and a runaway slave. She became a leader in the abolitionist movement. She led slaves to freedom through the Underground Railroad. She was known as the Moses of her people and was always ready to stand up for someone else. How are Harriet Tubman and Atticus Finch similar? Both were not afraid to stand up for what they believed. They didn't care about what other people thought of what they did, and they didn't let being at great personal risk stop them from what they believed in.
At the beginning of the story, Jim, Scout, and Dill are the best of friends. Dill opens up a new world of adventure for them. It began the summer Dill came to us, when Dill first gave us the idea of making Boo Radley come out. As the story progresses, Jim begins to grow up and become more independent. Slowly, he begins to grow apart from Scout. Atticus also has a friendship with Jim and Scout. They understand and listen to him better because his advice is coming from a friend's insight rather than their father's. How did it affect the characters? Scott and Jim learned more about other cities outside of Maycomb when Dill tells them about the other cities and his adventures there. The bonds between each character grew stronger as the story progresses.